What is up, RotoGrinders? Dean here. That's Dean 78904. If you want to get all technical, we're talking football, preseason football, the 3-game Thursday night slate. I'm just setting up the pins for Chris Gimino. You guys know Chris Gimino, director of premium and tools here at RotoGrinders. Some big boy contests out there, especially on DraftKings. So we're gonna be diving in, talking a little NFL preseason. You're gonna be doing most of the analysis here, Chris. Is this catching you by surprise? Preseason? Are we prepared? Are we excited? It's been too long. The people demand their football. I know it's preseason, but there's some big contests out there, and we're in the business of, we're not judging anybody. If you're playing this stuff, we're dabbling in those streets. You know, if you want to win yourself some money, this is the place to go. There's still some edges, I'm told. You tell me. Are there some edges in preseason this year?
Well, look, I mean, the information's never been easier to get in my entire life. The artificial intelligence is just out there doing half the work for me these days, which is amazing. At the same time, you know, you got to fact check it and all that kind of stuff, which is a new world. Is when you're out there asking for injury reports and they're telling you people who played in 2023. But the bottom line is, Dean, the edges are shrinking all across DFS. You know that. It's a more difficult game than ever, but at the same time, it's still incredible fun to get in there and learn the 5th, 6th, 7th string players on these teams and really start to make something important out of these preseason games. Because otherwise, Dean, if you're just watching these games for effect, it's some of the worst football you'll ever see.
Yeah, I mean, you fire up Netflix or something like that. I mean, not that we're judging. By all means, if you're enjoying some terrible football, have at it. Indy, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, as well as Vegas and Seattle. That is the 3-gamer we're talking about here on a Thursday night. For somebody that's never played preseason, they've never dabbled in preseason, my brain first goes to basketball, like, minutes equal money. And like, that's kind of the translation here for preseason. Just getting on the field is half the battle, and trying to figure out who's going to who's going to dress and who's going to get in the field is the trickiest part. And you said AI's on top of it. Gimino's on top of it. And we're recording this, we should be honest. We're not doing this right to the bell, and more information to get coming on through. It's why you subscribe, subscribe to RG, you get all the projections, get all the modifications, all the tinkering as we lead up to lock. But we're going to do the best we can do here. We're recording this here on a Wednesday night. But what would you give as like a basic tutorial, as far as building lineups, that is so much different than obviously, the regular season? How would you hold somebody's hand and say, this is your first time, this is what you do?
Well, the first thing you mentioned, availability, right? We don't just go out there and make up availability on a whim. We actually go and research what the reporters are saying. The beat reporters are incredibly important to constructing what the availability is going to be in preseason DFS, because they're telling you who was at practice, who wasn't at practice, what are the coaches saying about playing time, what are the coaches saying about people's roles, who they want to evaluate. These kind of things are all coming from beat reporters and from other services that are out there aggregating. So it's very important that we, the people who are trying to make sense of a slate, are going out and getting deep cut information on not just like, who's injured in a broad sense, but who didn't practice on Tuesday and like is iffy for the game. And then you can start to construct playing time expectations based on a couple of things. Their archetype, what kind of a player are they? Are they a young player? Usually young players are given an opportunity to play more in preseason. Are they a player that's fighting for a job? That's another kind of player that could be potentially asked to play more snaps in preseason. And certainly you want to look at the history of the coaches. Some coaches will play their guys, some coaches won't. Ultimately, you construct this puzzle and you come up with what you think is a reasonable projection, and you hope for the best. It is very volatile. Even if you get the projection right on playing time, you can get situations like a Brendan Rice last year, played tons of receiver snaps, got almost no receptions. It's just a function of these players either aren't that good or playing with quarterbacks who aren't that good. And quite frankly, like I said, the situation's very volatile, and you're just not always going to hit a home run, even if you call it exactly as it goes. But it is, again, a game of information, a game of paying attention, making sure you're up on the news. And then from there, once you have actually constructed a reasonable projection, it's only at that point in time you can start to build a lineup in which some of the rules are just a little bit different than you'll see in regular season DFS. And some of the known tropes of lineup construction you can throw out the window and mostly just focus on who the best plays are.
Yeah, it's funny looking at projections. I see it on the screen as well for lineup HQ, and these are median projections. But like our most highest projected quarterback, and we're going to give the top players position by position in just a second. Like Milrow has an 8-point DK median projection. Next quarterback 7, 7, 6, 6. It's so close, like you said, highly variant. And I guess that leads to my next question. Chalk. How bad is chalk? Whatever happens to be chalk, how bad is chalk when it comes to these contests? Because we're talking about one play. One play can win the slate for you sometimes. And how do you try to avoid that? How much do you go out of your way to not play the players that are projected better? But like somebody has to be the top guy, even if it's, we're talking about fractions of points.
Yeah, so the sources of information in preseason are pretty limited. There's only a couple of people stupid enough to spend their time digging around and trying to find all this information out for you people. And once you have this sort of situation where a very few number of sources are delivering to basically the entire audience that's playing, you're going to have some plays that are going to be very obvious and very chalky. And there's a player that you're looking at right now on the screen that is going to be one of those players on Thursday night. And look, some of these guys are very much worth playing and very much should be in a lot of your lineups. And then there's other guys where you might have an opportunity to say, hang on a second, why are we so confident that player X in this particularly volatile world of preseason DFS is going to be so chalky when this other guy, and you don't have to go very far down. You can find some extremely low ownership in preseason DFS because there's like a weird stratification. You've got like these core plays that everyone talks about that are like the most obvious kind of guys. And then you're all of a sudden looking at some guys who are really not that far away from them in their expectation, who are 1, 2, 3, 5% owned. So you get this really weird dynamic in ownership and very condensed chalk, just based on the fact that there's just not a lot of people talking about this these days.
Yeah, looking at the projection stuff, it is going to be pretty interesting when it comes to lineup construction. Getting to our favorite plays here in just a second. You kind of alluded to it, though. I want to get it out of the way. You said some of the normal tropes, normal strategies when it comes to standard, real football, DFS. Correlation, what I was hearing is that correlation is not a thing. Do we care about correlation? How much do we care about correlation in terms of, pairing your quarterback with a receiver? Who knows if they're even going to see the field together, some of these guys. So how much does that matter to you, if at all?
Yeah. So the logic of correlation doesn't go away, right? Obviously, if you get your pass catcher paired up with your quarterback, that's still good. But the idea that we have to focus on it as intensely as we focus on and having a run back in the game, right? Like these games, the totals on these games, Dean, are they're in the 30s. So we're not talking about, stacking big time games here with big time DFS upside on both sides for a run back. You're talking about maybe, there's some situations where you can find a quarterback to pair with your pass catcher. Maybe you should even do that, but you shouldn't necessarily make it the first thought in how you're constructing your lineup. That's the way that I would put it. It is certainly something you can do, but it is not something that you need to do.
Yeah, I was watching. You did a showdown show with Kyle last week, and you guys were talking about how the best projected position was defense, and it's logical because their defense, no matter who those 11 guys are, there's going to be 11 dudes wearing a uniform that can accumulate fantasy points for you on the field. And they had the highest, median projection. Doesn't mean they have the best projection. I don't know how it worked out for that particular game, but it's and that's the way I'm seeing it right now. Probably a defense isn't the highest scoring, player on this slate, but they are currently the Colts. Spoiler, currently have the highest projected number at 10. And we'll talk about that in a second. And we can play defense against our offenses too, right? Again, we can throw all that nonsense out the window. It's fine.
Sure, absolutely. And look, it is Wednesday, Dean, so we are going to, spend some time in the next 24 hours and getting these projections refined, but yes, certainly the defenses. I mean, have you seen the quarterbacks who are going to be in play here? Do you know who these people are, Dean?
At least half of them. I don't know if I can pick them out of a lineup, but I'm pretty certain I recognize some of those names. Yeah. I am in the best ball streets, and a couple guys I've heard of him. I've heard of that dude.
Yeah, well, Drew Lock's practically a Hall of Famer on this slate. So that's the kind of quarterback quality we're talking about. Of course, your defenses are going to be in play. Sacks, fumbles, turnovers. These are the sorts of things. By the way, last time Anthony Richardson was on a slate that I recall in week 1, he threw a pick 6. I think I'm remembering that right. But, certainly nobody is exempt. If you're playing in preseason here, things could get rough. You're playing with backup offensive linemen, backups all across, not knowing their jobs and roles, maybe not running the right route, all kinds of opportunity for defenses to succeed. But, again, all 8 defenses are going to be pretty close at the end of the day because, it's not super predictable to figure out which one of those teams is going to be awesome. But to say what you said more succinctly, the defenses are the only players that are playing the entire game.
All right. We teased it enough. The people are demanding the best plays by position. You mentioned Anthony Richardson. He's one of the quarterbacks we're expecting to get some run. You mentioned Drew Lock. He's another guy you expected to get in some run. I'm seeing Jalen Milroe. He's a I guess waiting in the wings there, I suppose, in Seattle when the wheels kind of fall off for the Seahawks. Maybe they won't. We'll see. But you tell me, where do you want to start with as far as quarterback?
Yeah, so Milroe and Locke, we can start talking about Seattle, right? Because they're not going to play their starters. They were pretty clear about that, and their depth chart is featuring three quarterbacks. So that means we've got the most likely situation is one quarterback playing the first half, one quarterback playing the second half. I have not, as of right this second, seen the confirmation on that playing time. If you're looking at which one of those two guys is upside to play more, it would definitely be Jalen Milroe, their rookie quarterback, who they are in development mode. They're not looking to play him full-time this year that we know of. They're more or less taking him as a developmental project. He was raw. He's not a player who came out of college with like a crisp passing game skill set. He was basically a YOLO player with a massive rushing skill set that is absolutely extremely appealing for DFS. And also he does like to throw the long one. He did throw deep in college, but like in between those two things, he wasn't necessarily that incredible. So there's a project going on here with Jalen Milroe, and preseason is one of the best places to work on that project. So when you talk about getting at least a half of a player with massive rushing upside, deep ball, and compare with some of the other players that we love on the slate, if we are looking to get some of that correlation, Dean, I think Jalen Milroe is probably your top quarterback on this slate pretty clearly.
Is there any quarterback we can expect to get more than a half, or a half is basically the most you're going to get?
Well, on this slate, we don't have any announcements of anybody getting more than that, which actually makes the quarterback projections pretty ambiguous, even with someone like Milroe, who does look pretty good and look like he's the clear best player on the slate. You could argue that there are maybe a couple of other players who you could pivot off of him. He's going to be very popular. I think he's going to be very popular. I haven't checked the streets yet, but I mean, we're talking about to me a pretty obvious play, getting a half or more with upside, all the skills. I mean, Milroe's the guy.
If not Milroe, then who?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of guys who are projected to play in the neighborhood of a half that I think we should talk about, because again, playing time tend to favor it more than like guys who are playing a little bit less, but could be efficient, right? Like your Anthony Richardsons, he's not going to play a full half, but he could be efficient. So we'll talk about him in a minute. But like Jake Browning, for example, for Cincinnati, Burrow's going to play a quarter. They've said that they want to play him pretty much most of the rest of the game, which I'm calling it a half, right? So if we're giving Burrow 2 series or a quarter, we'll call it that, then you're talking about a half of Jake Browning, who, if you remember from a couple of years ago in the regular season, came in with some pretty big games for the Bengals when Burrow was out. So he's certainly got some ability, and he's going to have some weaponry to work with as well on the Bengals. Some preseason legends, in fact, that we'll talk about later that Browning will have to work with. But yeah, so again, on a playing time basis in the preseason, we're certainly going to favor the floor of someone like a Browning, who is going to be in there for a while, especially someone who could throw touchdown passes. And you're pretty confident of that. And then there's some less obvious options. You mentioned Drew Lock. Okay, so Drew Lock, he's going to probably start this game tonight. We'll wait for that confirmation. And if he does, and we're expecting him to play a half, that's somebody that we've played in preseason before. He's been able to put up 10, 12 points, something that can really do a lot of good work for us. And that's something that we would certainly be considerate of if we're trying to pivot off of a Milroe, not necessarily something we're excited about. Then you got the Raiders situation. So tilted me out of my shoes, Dean. I see Pete Carroll come. They ask him, "Hey, are you going to play the starters?" His response to that is something to the effect of, "Everyone will be ready to go." And then every tweet is, "The Raiders will play their starters tomorrow." No, that's not what he said. Pete Carroll is a douche. Pete Carroll does this all the time. He's very coy. He
seems like a nice guy, though, but like I could see him being fickle with the media and this is obviously super annoying. For our needs, he's annoying. We don't like him.
Exactly. So he's being coy. I think he's practicing something that I think he feels is important, which is not divulging too much information. It's his preseason too, right? So he's not out there telling everybody who's going to play. He's trying to get in the habit of keeping it close to the vest. So there's a couple of scenarios. First scenario that I think is the most likely, which is, okay, he's probably just not out there telling people, there's a possibility they're going to play and there's no chance of it. So you give them 20%. You give them like the first quarter, a series for the starters, right? That's one possibility. Another possibility is the starters don't play at all. And then you've got a very different kind of a setup with your next level players on the Raiders. And then, of course, what do you do with the young players in that scenario? If the starters are sitting, you have 2 starters that are rookies at the wide receiver position. Are they going to sit? A lot to keep in mind there. But also, I remember a couple of years ago, Pete Carroll had something like this going on. You didn't know what was going on with the starters. We actually kind of thought they were going to sit. They played a half. So there really is a mixed bag that you could get here when Pete Carroll's being coy with not exactly saying whether the starters are going to play. At the end of the day, there is a player that should play in the second half of this game, Cam Miller, who's got some rushing skill set for the Raiders that could be quite appealing if he's getting anywhere close to a half. So all that to say that Cam Miller is certainly on the table for the Raiders, who is a, very, very far off the radar kind of a late round pick for the Raiders, endorsed by Tom Brady. And then his the person in front of him on the depth chart, Aiden O'Connell, would also be someone that would be interested in there. Dean, that was kind of a lot to be said there about the Raiders. Did that make any sense to you? Like how Pete Carroll is saying, yes, everyone will be ready to go, but then you can't just interpret that as they're definitely playing.
Something got lost in the translation with the AI, but to me, what I heard is it almost seems like more trouble than it's worth. But maybe one of these guys happens to be the one that, the top quarterback you need. But it's going to be some combination of Gino, maybe. And like you said, we don't know if the starters are going to play or not based upon that quote, despite the reporting. And then it'll be AOC or Miller. Do you have a lean amongst AOC or Miller? What if we get Gino not playing at all? Is it possible he doesn't start and then just 50-50 amongst AOC and Miller?
Well, I want the guy who can run, right? Like AOC stands in the pocket. He's a statue. Miller can run. You can go watch the video footage of him, and he's somebody who can, get out there and score with his legs. And that's certainly something that we're going to be finding appealing in DFS. And that's where I would lean. And that's why if he's playing closer to a half, he could actually be that guy that rivals Jalen Milroe as someone who scores more fantasy points. That's ultimately what we would care about, right? Like if Jalen Milroe doesn't get in the box, Jalen Milroe doesn't throw a touchdown pass, and Cam Miller does two of those, well, we're talking about a much different type of situation than the one we're expecting in our median projections.
So if I want the player that runs, why don't I just play Richardson and get it maybe doesn't get you 2 full quarters. Maybe it gets you a quarter and a half. But if he's out there running for a quarter and a half, if he runs a touchdown in, maybe throws one too, or, if he puts up what's the number? Give me the over under, Gimino. The highest scoring quarterback on DraftKings, over under 13 points.
It's definitely an under if you talk about the odds, but usually somebody scores up in the double digits, right? Like one
guy. I'm saying one person, the highest person, and not all of them. I'm just saying the quarterback that's optimal.
Yeah,
honestly, they score more or less than 13 DK points.
That's a pretty awesome line. So I'm not betting. That's an outright. Like, okay, you can't be expecting 15, 18 fantasy points. It can happen, but it's not something that you should be out there looking to achieve, right? Like you get 12 points, you're thrilled.
So why can't Richardson get me 12 points? He can get 30 or 40 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, and a couple passes. He does that too sometimes.
Sure can. So can Joe Burrow, right?
But that was the other guy I wanted to ask about. 2 series, 2 touchdowns.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's how it goes, right? Just ask anyone who's ever heard Andy Reid and say, play Patrick Mahomes. You get 2 touchdowns in your 2 series with Patrick Mahomes, right? Not necessarily. They do have running backs on the team, Dean. They could run it in. But, that's another thing. Like with Anthony Richardson is, are they even going to get to the goal line? Because we all seem to forget every summer, like this guy isn't exactly the greatest. You put him out, like I mentioned in preseason, he hasn't even been that great. And then in the regular season, of course, he's losing his job to Joe Flacco. And he's out here struggling to get 15 pass attempts projected for him on the books or something like that. Right? There was some ridiculous, I think it was a completions line last year that was just the absolute most absurd completions line I've ever seen for a player. This is the kind of player we're talking about. But the rushing upside, all that kind of stuff, Dean, of course he's going to be someone that you can consider if you're thinking he's going to play a quarter and a half, which is what the Colts are saying he's going to play. So I absolutely have him on the core plays list for the night. He's somebody that you can consider. He's just somebody that I'm going to be considering less so than someone like a Jalen Milroe.
Is some of that stuff like the coach speak and you're just trusting the coaches, trusting the beats? That's the best you can do because what else you can't. That's better than guesswork, I suppose. Take him at face value. Is it some of it fluid, do you think, in the terms of meaning if Burrow goes out there and it's like 4 for 4 in his first drive and, has a touchdown and leaves on a high note, that's it. Just like he had a great first game, but why push it? If Richardson, throws a touchdown and, he's right in the ground, he's looking good. And after a quarter, why leave him why set him up for possibly like a letdown? Did you understand what I'm asking? Like maybe like they pull him after something good just to kind of leave them feeling good. Or am I overthinking this? Did you understand my question here?
That definitely happens. It usually happens more for the guys who are going to play one or two series, right? Like if you see Burrow go out and just absolutely march down the field, throw a touchdown pass, maybe that'll be it for Burrow, right? Like,
yeah.
But like normally they will stick with the playing time because they want to get them a certain number of reps. Like everything's reps with coaches in preseason. So that's, I think you're probably going to see the guys play the amount or something close to the amount that they're being said they're going to play. So that, again, that does leave room for overperformance by players who are going to play less time than some of the other guys. And keep in mind, one quarter, like how much less is one quarter of Joe Burrow versus 2 quarters of Cooper Rush?
Yeah.
Like we get in these stupid conversations about playing time a lot of times preseason. Like, yeah, maybe it is a little bit undervalued, some of these guys, but ultimately it's a big mess. And that's every year it's the same conversation, Dean, is how are you going to sort out the mess? How are you going to sift through this and try to make the best decisions possible? Ultimately, when you do lean on playing time, try to balance that out with opportunity and skill, you're going to end up on the better side of it more often than not. Like I would say more often than not, I lean away from these guys who are playing less time.
You're running 150 lineups, hypothetically. How big is your pool? How many quarterbacks you're running out there? If you're max entering, you're making 150 lineups. And we're talking about Milroe and Browning. You mentioned Miller, Richardson, Burrow, AOC was mentioned. We mentioned Locke. I don't know if you've even talked about Leary just yet. I know you have in your notes. It's just like, do you have to make a decision and just like make some gut calls and saying it's just going to be these 4, these 5, or do you kind of spread out at quarterback?
I think that's a stylistic choice. I think there are people who will do it where they'll keep it narrow, and there's some people who will see out there playing, Will Dissly in the Hall of Fame game, right? Like there's people who will spread it out pretty wide. I think it's probably general to keep it pretty tight, but like you can make cases for Riley Leonard to accidentally do something. You can make cases for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I mean, these are guys that are going to be completely unknown. They're just not anywhere close to the first choice. So I'll usually, on a slate like this, I'll try to keep it to a core 3 maybe. And then, but again, I'm not playing 150 lineups. So that's not really a fair question.
I guess, and it also leads into the positions we'll talk about in a second. Are you more apt to spread out for receiver or spread out for running back? And that's where you're just looking for one play. Like one play is enough, and that can get you optimal. And the pool of players is also greater, and the variance also feels much greater. So would you be more apt, and we'll talk about those players in a second, to throw darts when it comes to receivers and running backs as opposed to quarterbacks?
Yeah, receivers you can definitely spread out more because it's just so difficult to make a projection on a wide receiver on a limited number of snaps in a game with bad quarterbacks, right? So that's like certainly a position that you can feel more comfortable getting deeper down the list. The running back position, a lot of times I'm going to keep it a little bit tighter, but there are still usually plenty of options. I think you're probably talking about 6 or 7 really good ones on this slate, and it's a 3-game slate. So there's definitely a pretty tight list that you're going to find there. A tight end, it's usually really tight. Like finding a tight end that looks good is always a struggle in preseason DFS. Luckily, it seems to be the same guy every damn week when a certain player's on the slate that we'll talk about later. So today we don't have to worry.
Who that is. I'm curious who that is.
Well, we are going to talk about it.
I'm going to stick around for the show. I was going to leave early, but now, I'm going to stay to the end when we talk about tight ends. You got anything else as far as quarterbacks?
No, man, that was definitely a lot.
Not related to the slates. Week 1, who's starting for the Colts? Is it Jones or is it Richardson?
Right now, they've been leaning in the direction of Richardson, but it's still to be determined. So not really sure. At the end of the day, I think no matter who starts the season, they're going to get benched. So it doesn't really matter.
That was my best ball teams asking because I'm seeing the same stuff. The beats seem to think that Richardson has the inside track, and it might be because he's just not doing as bad as Jones. That could be the case, but all right. Just figured I'd ask that question for the people also in the best ball streets. Okay, let's talk about some running backs. You talk about the Bengals. The Bengals, where maybe Burrow has 2 drives, they have 2 touchdowns, but you said, hey, they can also run the ball. And I'm seeing, as of right now, and this is somebody, speaking of best ball, that's popped up on my best ball teams. I cannot pick him out of a lineup, unless he was with like the Brady bunch. Like, okay, I know that guy definitely was not on the Brady bunch or the cast of friends. Brooks, I'm looking at on Cincinnati, and another guy, DJ Giddens, who there's a lot of good speak on him as well. Is that the first place we're looking at as far as running backs?
Yeah, it's one of the first places. I think we're missing our Baltimore Ravens right now, but we'll get that fixed up before tomorrow's slate. Taj Brooks is definitely somebody that we're looking at on this slate. The Bengals are going to be evaluating that position pretty closely. They want to know who Chase Brown's backup is going to be right now. They released Zach Moss, which opened the door pretty clearly for Taj Brooks to be that guy if he comes out and earns the job. They've got like some other jabronis like Kendall Milton and Gary Brightwell lurking around in this depth chart. We're certainly not really worried about Samaje Perine in this game. He's a veteran guy that you wouldn't expect to play a whole ton, especially after guys like Burrow exit. Brooks is a guy who could play probably one of the higher snap totals of the backs on this team, and they're certainly going to scheme touches and looks for him both in the run game and the pass game. So, yeah, Taj Brooks is one of the best plays on this slate. I don't think that's very debatable.
Talk to me about the Baltimore backfield.
Baltimore's backfield is one of the thinner charts that we have on today's slate. So what you have going on is they did joint practices this week. So Derrick Henry obviously is not going to ever play in a preseason football game. You are not going to see somebody like a Justice Hill come out there as he got most of his reps in those joint practices. Maybe he trots out there for a couple of plays, but you should not really expect to see them. They signed D'Ernest Johnson. That's a clue. Usually when they sign a pretty low-end, off-the-street running back, they do so with one express purpose. It's to eat snaps late in the game. So earlier in the game, that leaves us just a couple of different options. One of their guys whom we might have expected to see is not available, so we're going to be looking at a whole lot of Rasheen Ali and Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell, of course, you may remember from 2023 fame, busting off big plays in NFL regular season. We're going to see Keaton Mitchell back and probably here to get his legs back underneath him under the lights in this game. I don't know exactly how much. I think I have a little bit less concern about Rasheen Ali and his ability to play, and therefore I'm calling him one of my core plays on the slate. I definitely like the idea that the Ravens on this thin depth chart on a team that traditionally likes to run the ball with not a whole lot to speak of to evaluate in the wide receiver room. Those positions are largely set on the team. I mean, they could be searching for special teams. That's another, maybe that's one thing they could be evaluating there. But I do think probably just going to see them try to get through this game without losing too many bodies and probably give the ball to Rasheen Ali and Keaton Mitchell quite a bit.
All right, you referenced football from years past. I remember seeing Will Shipley when given a chance, when Barkley did not want to go for the record, and he was pretty awesome in a small sample. I know, again, speaking of best ball, he's a handcuff a lot of people are interested in. So he's a name I recognize. I think he's pretty clearly, I think, the number 2 on Philly. How much run are we expecting for him, and how much do we like him when compared to the field of running backs?
Yeah, so Philly's got just a couple of running backs themselves. They're not an incredibly deep depth chart. I think with Philadelphia, they generally don't like to run anyone who's going to play in the regular season like a whole lot. Like you'll just see like the deeper down the depth chart guys run. But the way that I sort of had it laid out as maybe we'll see a quarter from each one of their available backs. They have Shipley, they have A.J. Dillon, probably won't play a full quarter out there. Montreal Johnson has a hamstring, so I'm not really expecting him to go, but we'll be watching that to see if he's available because he's somebody certainly that could eat snaps if he's available. Whatever Shun-Derek Powell has a good chance to play a lot. Dean, are you excited about Shun-Derek Powell?
You're talking about SDP? Of course. I know about SDP. They got to call him that, right?
And Keelan Robinson has just been getting tossed around like the trash throughout the league as the worst running back on anyone's roster at any given time. So, yeah, Will Shipley by default looks like the best option here on the Eagles. I think there's some other players that you alluded to earlier that we should probably be looking at first. Going back to Indianapolis, DJ Giddens, big competition for the RB2 role in that particular offense. You've got the incumbent that we've seen before over there, Goodson, and he's competing with Khalil Herbert, who's still lurking around the league. But Giddens is the guy that they want probably to win that job. That's why they drafted him, and hopefully he comes through on that. This is going to be one of those opportunities where he gets to cement that particular position as the guy, as the RB2. They should give him every opportunity to do so. I'm not saying it's going to be significantly more opportunity than every other back on the slate's going to get, but it looks pretty good for him to have a chance, and he certainly looks #good compared to the actual skill sets of the other guys. So we do want to lean into that a little bit. If a guy is actually talented, skillful, all that kind of stuff, Giddens looks like he's got that profile and someone that I think we should lean into on this slate. We also want to talk about Seattle. Seattle's got 2 guys. They're going to be running through Damian Martinez out of the U. He's kind of like a bruising kind of grinder back that we can look for as someone who could get in the box for us. Later in the game, we'll see Holani, who scored twice in preseason a year ago, can also get it done in the pass game a little bit. Those 2 guys are going to be certainly plays you're going to want to mix into your lineups, no matter how many lineups you're making, assuming you're making more than one.
Do you have a lean amongst the 2? Like if you're saying that Martinez is the bruising back, maybe he's the goal line back, but maybe he's also the guy that's not going to break off something long. But again, I'm asking this not knowing who either one of these people are.
I'm feeling like more people are going to play Martinez. So I would probably lean into Holani. If again, I'm playing, this is a 10,000 player tournament team, right? So like there's, I'm going to lean a little towards Holani, but I'm certainly going to play Martinez. And this is a situation, by the way, you can play both these guys if you wanted to in the same lineup, right? Like I don't think they're going to eat in. I mean, I guess you can make the case that they're cannibalistic in some way, but I mean, they don't really have that many running backs to work with here. If you assume Charbonnet is going to play little or none at all, Anthony Tyus, they just signed off the street yesterday. They have a fullback and they have something called Jarcadia Wright. So, I mean, like clearly these 2 guys could both get enough work to be useful on the slate. And if you wanted to try them both, you certainly could. I'm not probably going to do that all that often, but again, just some different rules and different tropes that you need to get out of your head when you go to build a lineup.
I assume Chase Brown basically probably on the Burrow plan, like 1 series, maybe 2 series, that kind of thing at most.
Yeah, not mentioning him, but I mean, again, like you can just name anyone with a pulse, Dean, and you could actually make a case for him if you wanted to. We're just talking about the guys that we want to start with and the guys we want to talk about as core plays.
Well, don't the people, and I know everybody uses projections and they're going to hit the, optimize. And this player, as of right now, this stuff can change with new news. Maybe Pete Carroll says a new quote that gets misinterpreted. But aren't the people excited to roster Alshon Gentry? Like, isn't that something people want? Like, I know right now, and again, this is super fluid. This can change. His projection's not great. But the Raiders also kind of seem like an organization that wants to show off their fancy new tool. I don't know. Like, how do you interpret that? How do you put a projection on that? You're the guy to ask because you make these projections, but it's tough. I'm glad it's not my job.
They should fire everyone on the staff if that guy plays a lot. That's all I have to say about that. Running back's a brutal position. He's going to get a lot of carries in his career, hopefully, Dean. You don't put him out there against the 3rd stringers who are going to like hip drop tackle him and end his career in the preseason of his first year. Okay. Like I get it. Like you want to get a guy a couple of reps sometimes, but like if he's out there for more than a series, I mean, forget it. Like they just fire him all.
You're making 20 lineups. Is he in your pool?
Genty?
No, you're saying no.
Oh God,
okay.
No. Oh God, no.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to understand. I mean, I understand. Like, you got to be on the field, and he's probably not going to be in the field a heck of a lot. But maybe the Raiders just, go against the grain and do something that's not necessarily logical. Or maybe he just breaks one off for his first carry, and that's it. 70-yard. I mean, that's going to happen. But yeah. So
I don't have reason to believe that he's going to play. So therefore, or not going to play a lot. Like a lot of that is intuition, right? Like you just assume that these guys are going to get bubble wrapped. But like if we get word or we get some kind of information that suggests he's going to play, I mean, that would change the math a little bit, but it's hard. Like it's hard for me to believe. Even if someone tells me he's going to play, like I still don't believe it. Like, what are you doing?
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
All right. Let's talk about some receivers. Unless you have anything else as far as running backs. And man, if you liked our receiving, our running back median projections, you're gonna love our receiver median projections. Good Lord, we're talking about like in the 4s and the 3s as a median projection. Of course, some are gonna beat this. It's just hard to project, but start wherever you want to start. I'm saying Jamar Chase actually has a pretty good projection in just as maybe 1 or 2 series because he's fantastically talented. I see Jack Besh here for the Raiders. I know he's in a battle. One of the rookies for the Raiders as far as the receivers. But I think Torrey Horton, was that the first one you highlighted on our notes? I just closed that page accidentally. But I think that's the first person you want to talk about, or start wherever you want to start when it comes to receivers.
Sure. And I could talk about this, a little bit as far as like someone like Jamar Chase is concerned. Yeah, I mean, this projection came out. This will probably get grind down a little bit, like so he's not necessarily looking like the top play on the slate, because I don't know if that's necessarily true. But I mean, he's going to play a quarter, and a quarter of Jamar Chase, if you just divided his regular season long, weekly projection by 4, you're probably going to get something even higher than 3.79 a lot of times. So yeah, that makes sense, but it's just not something that I would start to focus on first, because he's the kind of guy, if they say the starters are going to play a quarter, he might actually leave after the first drive or something like that, right? These are the kind of things that tend to happen in preseason DFS, to the point where I don't necessarily trust. Now, that being said, Jamar Chase could easily score in the first drive and be someone that you can use. Not the absolute first name that I'm going to mention when it comes to preseason DFS, just something that could work out. And I don't even know if I necessarily agree with this Jack Besh projection that our team put out here right here. I do think that he's on the list. I think he's someone that you could consider, but I think you would definitely first want to make sure he's playing, because he is a starter for the Raiders. And if the Raiders starters don't play, of course, that's a problem. But secondly, I do think like a guy like Horton is going to probably get a little bit more run lengthwise in the game. We don't have certainly Pete Carroll didn't tell us. And I don't necessarily know that the Seahawks told us how much Torrey Horton's going to play. But if you ask me to pick between the two, I'm personally going to pick Torrey Horton, star of training camp for the Seahawks, trying to cement himself not only as a roster player for the team, which seems to be more of a certainty at this point, but he's actually trying to compete with Marquez Valdes-Scantling for wide receiver 3 reps. We don't know that that's where it's going to end up in week 1. We don't even know if that's where it's going to end up by the end of the season, but it's something that the Seahawks are excited about. And usually when they're excited about evaluating a player, that's what they do. They put him out there on the field and they evaluate them.
I'll tell you this. They're not excited about the prospect of playing MVS, are they? They know what he is.
I doubt we'll see MVS in the game at all. He was a little bit dinged up, and he's a veteran. So they said they were going to rest their starters. So that's one of the reasons that we like someone like a Torrey Horton, is because he's probably going to get in there maybe with Drew Lock, who's a little bit better of a passer as far as I can tell than Milroe. I mean, everyone's entitled to improve, but just, between the two guys, I think you'd probably rather have a pass catcher with Drew Lock at the moment.
Looking at your list, by the way, and I know we said correlation is not absolutely a must necessarily, but if I'm making one lineup, and I'm going to dabble. It's a Thursday night. There's not a lot of baseball going on. I'm going to pair Richardson with A.D. Mitchell. That sounds like a lot of fun, right? That sounds like a 60-yard pass waiting to happen, or an interception. Mitchell, I know a lot of pedigree, a lot of talent, right? You could see there's some ability there, and there was some hype there in preseason. You wanted to talk about A.D. Mitchell, and you don't have to sell me on it, but sell the people on A.D. Mitchell.
Well, there was a couple of early days in camp where he was struggling. The same kind of headlines we're used to seeing from him, drops, things of this nature. But lately, they've described him as more of being on fire and doing the right things, and someone that they're trying to get to ascend his position on the depth chart, ascend his position within the team, and actually pair his athletic skill with the knowledge of the game and the consistency of production and the consistency of performance and the consistency of lining up and all these kind of things it takes to be a pro. Preseason game would be a really good chance for him to prove that he's taking this to heart and that he is evolving and growing as a player. And because you're talking about getting out your starting quarterbacks basically for the entire time that he's going to play, it looks like a real nice spot for Mitchell. He is someone who, like you said, he can get done with the deep ball. It doesn't necessarily have to even be a deep ball. He can run after the catch. He can do a lot of really good stuff with the ball in his hands. And there's a lot of talent there. So for a player that I'm not necessarily that high on in general right now, I do think that I'm going to be really high on him when I go to make my lineups here in the Hall of Fame game. And yes, if you want to find a stacking partner, go ahead and stack him with Richardson if you want to. You're probably not playing Daniel Jones, so don't do that. But Mitchell is somebody you definitely want to consider in your player pool.
I saw a couple other names you wanted to talk about. LeJohntay Wester. Okay. My apologies. I've never heard of him. I'm sure he's spectacular. We mentioned Besh. I guess Besh and Thornton's kind of a conversation you touched on as well. They seem to be in a battle for the wide receiver 3 spot there for the Raiders. Ricky White the third. Feel free to give me some information. Who is Ricky White the third, and why should I care about him? And add some color to the other name. The LeJohntay Wester. Why do I care about him?
So he's like maybe the honorable mention of all the guys at the wide receiver position that I'm looking at. He's just a guy fighting for a special teams role on the Ravens. They have a much deeper roster of available wide receivers than some of the other teams. So therefore, I'm not that excited to play LaJohntay Wester in a spot like this. With quarterbacks, Cooper Rush from time to time he can get it done, but I'm certainly not that excited about Devin Leary, who might be in the game when Wester's out there. So yeah, it's not my favorite play, but I think among all the Ravens wide receivers, he's probably the best you're going to do. Ricky White is a guy who was dinged up for a little while the last couple of weeks, but looks like he's back at practice and participating, and he should be given a chance on Thursday. He's a 6'1", 449 speed guy who can with a big body, so he could be like a red zone kind of a threat. You can also play the deep ball, and Milroe likes to throw the deep ball, so he's someone who I think is going to be in the game with Milroe a little bit later, that I think you could look to pair up if you're interested in that correlation stack. The Eagles are the guys I really kind of want to talk about. And I'll just as a proxy for some of the other guys, I'll just talk about Elijah Cooks, because he's also like a bigger red zone threat type of guy. He's actually he's over 6 feet tall, and he's somebody that we're going to be looking at playing kind of a lot of snaps, because the Eagles in years past have run like maybe 6 wide receivers in their preseason games, and they're always deep down the depth chart. So if you're talking about 6 wide receivers in a 2-half football game, you're really saying 3 guys playing a half. And that's what the snap counts look like if you go look at PFF when you go check out the Eagles. And that's a really good situation for preseason. Someone like Elijah Cooks, who they're called, I guess they're calling it the Summer of Cooks, or one guy on the Eagles beat called it the Summer of Cooks. Now I'm saying everyone's saying it. But
Summer of George, Summer of Cooks.
The Summer of Cooks is here. I do think the Eagles, Jabroni's wide receivers are going to play quite a bit, and Cooks is the guy I'm representing as the captain of that crew.
What happened to you mentioned Cooks being this big tall guy? Isn't Johnny Wilson? Is he still alive? He's still a thing. I was told that guy was supposed to be an amazing red zone threat because he's in like 6'9". How tall is Johnny Wilson in cleats?
I don't have that in front of me, Dean, but yeah, he's a tall drink of water, to say the least. And quite
6'6", I'm seeing.
He might waddle his lanky legs on the field for this game for a little while, but they're probably not going to play some of these guys that they know are sort of already lurking at the top end of their depth chart right now. This is a stat. They won the Super Bowl, Dean. Did you see that?
Congratulations.
They got Dotson and Wilson. They're pretty much on the team already. So I don't expect to see them like a whole lot, if at all. So we're going to be looking a little bit deeper down the chart for the guys that are going to be playing snaps for the Eagles, and we can you'll be able to spot Johnny Wilson on the sideline standing because he'll be above everyone, but he's probably not going to have his helmet on.
I tried to make him happen last year, and it never quite happened. I don't know how he did in preseason, but you remember the hype. I'm sure you remember the hype on Wilson, right? He's tall. You just throw the ball up in the air.
Cooks is 6'4", so I mean he's pretty tall too. You can just play him instead.
Any other receivers you want to talk about, or shall we pivot to a tight end? There's a couple sexy names here, at least for the best ballers like myself. Arroyo looks like he's emerging there in Seattle. I know people are excited about Tyler Warren in Indiana. And neither one of those guys could be the guys that have been catching touchdowns, in every preseason, because they haven't. This is their first preseason. So you teased it. Who is the guaranteed touchdown at tight end?
Sometimes it's just about a little bit of simple math to figure out who you like in preseason DFS, Dean. And we've got
See what you did.
Bengals depth chart. Well, you've got Mike Gesicki's out with a hamstring. You've got Noah Fant, who they just signed. He's out. Eric All Jr. on the non-football injury list or physically underperformed list, which one of those lists, but he's out. That's going to leave you with 4 guys: Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson, Cam Grandy, Tanner McLaughlin. Cam Grandy is a non-nimble jabroni. We can cross him off the list. Tanner McLaughlin is relatively accurately described as a camp body or deep practice squad guy at best.
He's like Rudy, basically.
Then you've got yourself Drew Sample, who is generously referred to as a blocking tight end. I mean, not because he can't block, just because, he's not necessarily going to light the world on fire with his receiving chops.
Yeah.
But what you've got is the legend Tanner Hudson, Dean. It's back again for like a 5th straight year. We can't get away from this guy. It's setting up perfectly for him. It's going to be the Hudson show again. Unbelievable. It just never ends. But he's the best player in the slate, clearly.
He's clearly the best play because you start with 1 touchdown, is what you're saying. That's what
you certainly start with 3 receptions. So
that's a lot.
It is for tight end.
that is huge. So Tanner Hudson, I was gonna say sickos that play cash games. There's probably a cash game edge, I would imagine. Maybe I'll make some cash games out there in the streets, throw some, post some in the lobby. But is he your cash game tight end, Tanner Hudson?
Yeah, definitely. Because again, you are going to have a very high probability of at least one catch, which is that's a great place to start. Is get one fantasy point, right? A tight end
on the board,
because it's, believe it or not, you can get 0, pretty easy.
I believe it.
And I would say that Tanner Hudson is probably good for 4 just about every time. So I don't know what his projection is right now, but I mean, it's certainly, it's 3. It's over 3. So I think that's right. So like he's up there with some of these other guys that we're liking on the slate. Certainly, go ahead and get yourself some Tanner Hudson.
Yeah, we have them kind of grouped together with Hudson and Warren and Arroyo, the 2 others I mentioned. And like you said, this is grain of salt. Understand these projections are going to change as we close and unlock, as more information comes in, as Pete Carroll answers some more questions confusingly. But next up is Arroyo and Hudson. Do you have a preference amongst those 2?
Yeah, so Arroyo probably over Tyler Warren, simply because I do think Tyler Warren fits the description of somebody that they might yank from the game sooner than other guys. Like maybe he'll get out there for the first quarter. And I do think that there's almost no player on the entire slate more likely to get a schemed target than Tyler Warren at this point in time. He's somebody that they've been talking up quite a bit in camp, and they're pretty excited to use him on offense. He's probably going to end up being one of their top offensive weapons. When you got a really good tight end like this that can do a lot of things, he can run the ball. So he could be your tush push guy. Maybe, he can, well, not that you need that if you have AR, but I mean, you've got like a lot of different things that you can do versus, and he's a red zone threat for sure. I've seen him make some incredible catches already in camp as a red zone guy. And the skill set's just broad and varied. And I do think that he'll have schemed looks, and you're ultimately very, very unlikely to get a 0 if you click Tyler Warren, unless they decide to bubble wrap him, which is always a possibility.
So how goofy do I have to be at tight end? Can I just stick to those 3, or is it somebody like a Charlie Kohler that can break the slate with like a 2-yard touchdown?
Yeah, the more I thought about Kohler, the more I think to myself that this is a guy that's been participating in the joint practices for the team. And then Scotty Washington was a guy originally listed as a wide receiver on the depth chart, but really he's a tight end. So like they kind of have more tight ends than I thought. And I really think that Kohler is a risk of not playing like a whole lot in the game. And they'll probably slide it down to Mitchell Payton or Scotty Washington. The back end of this depth chart is really where they could end up sliding the snaps. Ultimately, we're not excited about really any of them. They all pretty much just got signed except for Payton Mitchell. So yeah, I can obviously see that Baylor Cupp is going to be out there for a while. He doesn't have a salary yet on DraftKings. If he gets one, maybe we can think about it. But it's for being a very thin depth chart, it's not that exciting, to be honest with you. Even though I do think they're going to be out there a lot, and it is something worth considering. I can't really like stand on a hill and say I love Charlie Kohler right now.
Your next favorite tight end after those 3, and I also feel obligated to ask, and I feel like I know the answer. I mean, Brock Bowers obviously is the best tight end, and how long will he actually be on the field? We have a projection for him, but it's a baby projection because we're using logic and we're saying, well, why in the world would you play Brock Bowers more than, I don't know, a series or 2? But it feels like, and you tell me, you're the guy, less opportunity cost at tight end, right? There's less guys yet to beat. Maybe Bowers puts up 5 and that's good enough. I don't know. Maybe 4 is good enough at tight end. Right? That's
yeah. I mean,
no tight end score a touchdown. Like that's very much in the realm of possibilities. So
if I'm pretty convinced, if I'm convinced that Brock Bowers is going to play, maybe I'll think about it. I'm really not convinced he's going to play right now.
Okay.
But let's work under the assumption we assume he's going to play. I would think he's like more of like a 1-2 series guy. So could certainly avoid a 0. Not going to be a whole lot of upside beyond that. But then again, I'm not sure there's a lot of upside with any of these guys. I think Hudson's probably, and maybe Arroyo to a certain extent. I mean, they have some upside here, but there's just not a lot of guys with like big upside on this slate. And there's some guys that you could dabble with on the Eagles, Calcaterra being one of them, Kylan Granson. I mentioned McLaughlin at the back end of the Bengals depth chart. If Tanner Hudson doesn't play the whole game, which we don't really know, he could be someone who could be out there catching passes as well.
just officially, like as far as lineup building, that Vegas Seattle game is 2.5 hours after the second game starts. Cincinnati Philly 7:30 on the East Coast. So you probably, maybe, I don't know. Like you said about Pete Carroll, you don't know if you're gonna have the news. We're not gonna know. We are gonna know. What do you think? You think we'll have the starters by 7:30 on the East Coast for the Vegas Seattle game?
We will not. We may not get them at all. So
Yeah.
and that's the one thing about preseason is that you're relying basically on beat reporters. And I would honestly expect that we basically won't get it. Like the Pete Carroll, I mean, if they release it, it's going to be at like very near to the last minute. So
Oh, really?
yeah. That's
who's
how
dressing? You get that? Who's dressing?
what you get is you get video of who's on the field and you start to eyeball it up, and that's really, you hit the nail on the head. Like you're getting beat reporters making an assessment of like, this guy's not in the warm-up line, right? This guy's not he's in street clothes. We're getting the sense that player X isn't going to be involved in the game or not. They have sources, but it's definitely happening in the last 30 minutes before the game a lot of times. So it's something you definitely want to check out in the Discord, where we'll be hanging out and we'll talk about what's going on there.
That's what I wanted to ask about, because I don't play a lot of preseason, but I remember when I was playing, I would jump in the Discord, and it's not just you and other people at RG. It's like just a collection of people that are just trying to compile information and get somewhat of an edge. RotoGrinders.com/Discord. It's just the NFL channel. A lot of our Discord channels are free. That happens to be a free one. You just need a general RotoGrinders account. You don't need a paid account. We love the paid accounts, but you don't need a paid account. Get a Discord channel and people will help you out. And if you have information, please, by all means, share. Defense, do we have any take as far as defense? This the Mike Tyson gif where we're just throwing darts, or do you feel like you're confident that defense X is distinctly the best? Do you have a preference amongst defense?
Not particularly. I'm getting the feeling that we just populated the builder with some numbers that are, the efficiency is not ground down yet. Maybe some of the top level statistics aren't necessarily where they need to be. Doing a projection for preseason at all is pretty challenging in general. So I wouldn't necessarily go by what's been on the screen so far as what the final projections will end up being. But what I will say is that, you start to look at some of the teams that are showing up towards the top here, and it's going to be, teams that are going to be facing backups pretty much the whole time. The Colts are going to be against the Ravens backups. The Devin Leary certainly sounds fairly appealing, and they're going to be also playing their starters. So maybe keeping, the offense off the field from getting the negative points scoring wise. You got somebody like the Bengals who are going to be out there against Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Kyle McCord, who's a rookie, and Tanner McKee. So, I mean, again, hard to make an argument against if these were the final projections, if these guys were towards the top, sure. But I think you could just run down this list and start making a case for any team. And I don't think it's really worth over pursuing the discussion of defense at this hour. I think ultimately it's just going to be a matter of trying to attack the most turnover prone quarterbacks and situations. And I think you can make a case for most of these teams that there's a worthy case for turnovers in a situation to attack here. I mentioned Jalen Milroe and Drew Lock for the Raiders there. I mean, those are both certainly guys that you could expect could make mistakes. So I wouldn't cross necessarily any team from a defensive perspective off the list.
How do you handle the flex position? By projections are telling me I should play running backs, but that's based upon median projections. Do receivers possibly have a higher ceiling? Is that something you do to be different? Play receivers in the flex spot? I can't imagine. I guess you can. I can't imagine playing two tight ends. I guess that's possible, but again, that's another way to be different. Flex spot, how are you handling it?
You're going to see a lot of running backs in the flex spot on preseason slates. And to some extent, normally, yes, the receivers have the higher upside. And I think that that's still true. Like they can still pop off a big play. And it's pretty hard to get any kind of running back enough touches to get over top of, 60-yard touchdowns, right off the bat. You're talking about 13. So that's pretty tough for any running back to get, just grinding out 4 or 5 yards of carry. Obviously running backs are allowed to hit big plays too. They're just a little bit harder to come by. So I would definitely say that the receivers are the higher upside play, but there's not enough of them with a really, really strong playing projection profile on this slate that I would really recommend going away from running backs. Some of these running backs look pretty good, and I think that's probably the way to go if you're only making one.
Do you want to give me a favorite play on the slate? Any sort of hot take? I know it's really, really tough. But right now, the way you see it, you want to make a bold call. Who's breaking the slates? The must-have player?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to make a bold call, but I mean,
Okay.
again, I talked about a lot of my favorite players already. I'm pretty excited to get involved with DJ Giddens. You know, I'm hopeful that we'll see something nice happen there. I think Taj Brooks is pretty exciting, and I think the Seattle running backs are going to be interesting, and ultimately Tanner Hudson. I mean, at the end of the day, like I know everyone else is going to do it too, and probably going to hate myself when I click him and he gets 4 fantasy points or whatever. But like
4 might be good.
It could be, but I love the folklore of it, Dean. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's just kind of cool to do the analysis objectively and land on that player when it's just been a big ongoing joke for years. But truth be told, he is probably one of the best tight ends options on this slate, pretty objectively, and I'm excited to click it.
Anything else you want to say in regards to this slate? And again, a lot of this stuff, a lot of this conversation, I've said it a couple of times, so I want to get it out there. It is fluid. It's preseason. There's a lot of guesswork. We're going to do our best. A lot of HQ projections will be on top of things. This stuff's all going to change to some degree. But anything else you want to tell the people before we sign off here, the analysis on the 3-gamer?
Yep, just head over to the Discord. We're going to be hanging out there talking about this slate all night. We got some great content on RotoGrinders. We got the core plays. We'll have the lineup HQ. We'll have the projections all sanded down by the time it's coming out tomorrow. And of course, we'll have some notes on some of these players in a little bit more detail that can really make some of these takes that I gave out loud a little bit more concisely put.
How often are these shows going to be going down? I know this. We did one for Showdown. Are we expected to do these shows basically all the way up to the bell, all the way up to the start of the season?
We'll do one a week, Dean. I think that's enough of me that for anyone's taste. But we'll talk one time. We'll go through the slate and we'll have some fun and we'll really get after it.
I want more, Gimino. I know you're busy doing projections for like 17 different sports and you're super busy, but I, for one, I want more. Do hit that like button. Do subscribe. You turn on notifications so you know when we go live. You know when we're posting such content. Let us know in the comments if you want us to keep doing this. Again, that was Christopher Gimino, Director of Premium and Tools here at RotoGrinders. I was Dean. Thanks for watching. Good luck. Go win some money. We're out of here. Oh!